Hey guys, Dr. Calvin here with the KNRX, and we're going to go over one of my favorite regions to use the KNRX. Not so much because it's my favorite region, but because I love how the scissor function of the KNRX works in this area using that compression to distension technique, and it's the knee. If you followed me up to this point, if you haven't followed me up to this point, please go back and watch at least the compression to distension video, and where I explain the intricacies of how to use that technique. It's by far my favorite way to do it. There are other ways of doing and using compression tools, but that's my favorite way. And then at least you'll know we're on the same wavelength when we're talking about compression distension technique. When we are working on the knee will give you pain in a variety of different ways. One of the biggest ones is a tracking issue where the tendons going down the quadricep or down the outside of the leg, the front of the leg, or the inside, or even the back of the leg, they're not balanced. They're not riding and running smoothly, and they will give you a pull, a tension pull on that kneecap, and that will give you a tracking issue. That could also result in pain on the inside of the knee. It could result in pain on the outside of the knee. And so we're going to show you just a global technique or areas to work on for that knee to just improve, enhance those tendon structures so that they're pulling evenly, that they're moving evenly, that we're reducing contracture, even scar tissue in those areas, and that everything is starting to return and recruit properly again. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to extract the cane out all the way to the last hole set there. So that's going to enable us to get to the scissor function. So you'll see this clip here and how those two sort of marry one another, and that pulls apart, and now we are in sort of that scissor function of the cane. The roller stick portion is going to be on top. So I want that on top, and I want the other bar portion to be on the bottom. The cool thing about the scissor function is it's going to allow me to work reciprocal muscle groups at the same time. So in this instance, I'm going to start off on the front and the back. And so I'm just going to put my leg over the top of the big hook portion, and I've got the roller stick portion on top. Now come over here a little closer. Where we start is critical. There's your kneecap, and I'm going to start right at the north end of that kneecap. I want to just be off of that northern pole, or that highest part of that kneecap. That's where I want to start with the compression. And so I'm going to put that roller stick portion there. I'm going to stabilize with this hand as I start to compress again to that threshold, and then I'm going to hold it there. At the same time, I'm getting compression in the back end on my hamstring tendon. So I'm getting both concurrently, and that's the beauty of doing this scissor function. So we compress, threshold, let it fade. Now watch me here. I can either, to get like a little advanced kneading technique, I can move this back and forth this way, or I can physically grab that roller stick portion and just start moving it back and forth that way. Either one that you're comfortable with, but the most important, get to that threshold and wait for the fade to happen. Remember, the fade is the therapy. The fade means that you actually achieved something therapeutic. So that's why we're waiting on that. Once that fade occurs, then we can get fancy, and then we move it just a fraction of an inch up or closer to your body. So we always go from the furthest point away closer to, and then we're going to do that section as well, and then that section, and we're just going to work our way back up at least 4 to 5 inches from the top of that kneecap up the quad. And so I end right about here. Now, there's nothing saying that you cannot go moving continually up that quadricep, but this is where I've found to be most of the problem. So that's what I want you to target every single time. I'm going to do it now a bit more of an advanced move with my knee bent. So again, now I'm going to be taking those tendons to a little bit more tension. I want to be on a platform where my knee is about the equivalent of my hip height. So this is just a standard bench that you would see in a gym. And if you don't have something like this at home, maybe have a platform that your foot can sit on so that knee gets on the equivalent height as the hip. And I'm going to take that big hook and I'm just going to hook it around my other leg. And that's going to allow me to create the leverage that way. And so I'm going to, again, start right here at the top of that kneecap. So I'm going to get that there. I'm going to take this other hand here and I'm going to stabilize. And now I'm going to leverage down there until I get that threshold. Doesn't take much to get there. Hold that fades. And now look, I'm going to give that a little bit of a wiggle back and forth. And then I'm just going to walk my way up that quad. Getting this, the closer to the kneecap, getting that stuff figured out and getting that stuff dialed in is your most important section of tissue. That's where I find that a lot of that stuff will chronically sit for years and years and years and build up. And it will start to create sort of that imbalance in that knee and give you that ache, that pain in those knee patterns that we see. The next from there is we're going to move to the side and we're going to take care of this lateral portion or that IT band. Similar technique, very similar technique. We're just moving it. So now we're more in a V, but I want to put the emphasis on that IT band. So I'm just going to rest this portion here against my other thigh, and I'm going to take that and compress that way. I may lift a little bit here and just get this full scissor function here. And now I'm getting that IT band and I'm getting some of those adductors here, those muscles on the inside of the thigh. Again, compress, threshold, let that fade, and then give that a little wiggle. And then I can just walk that back on that IT band. I can also do this one with my legs straight up on the bench as well. So whatever you're most comfortable, I'd say if you're not getting to threshold one way, try it the other way. I'd like with the knee bent as far as a little bit more of an advanced move because we're just taking those muscle and tendon complexes a little bit more to tension before we now start forcing them to distend. And again, I'm going to walk that up at least that distal 4 to 5 inches there on that IT band, but you can walk this one all the way up to that hip there. So you just move out here a little further and walk your way up this way. Obviously, it's a little faster than you would do it. I'm just doing that for demonstration purposes. So that's going to help work, just sort of take collectively what's going on in the knee. Now, you will often find that if your knee has been tracking wrong for imbalanced for a long time, you're going to find that you're going to have these pain syndromes living right in some of those medial and lateral joint lines. And that's where we're going to take this little nub portion and we're going to work that in those little joint lines, because underneath there, deep enough, is what's called a meniscus. That is the pad for the knee. And sometimes that meniscus is actually damaged and torn. A lot of times you will have that medial and lateral pain syndrome, but it's not the meniscus that's reporting, it's those outer layers of the ligament and capsules of the outer layer of those joints that just becomes deranged through that imbalance process. But the pain syndrome lives in those medial and lateral joint lines, and those are very palpable. You can get in there with that little nub and put that pressure in there to that threshold, and you would feel that response. You would feel that visceral response, like, oh, I feel like I'm right on top of what is actually ailing me. And that's going to allow you to do that compression distension technique over those ligaments. And oftentimes you find you do that, and the whole time you're worried about an actual meniscus tear, when it actually is just a derangement of those particular capsule ligaments. After you do that work, it's going to feel a lot better. You can also come down on the front end of this tendon. That's called that patellar tendon. And you're going to do that the same way I just demonstrated for this portion of those tendons, but you're just going to move this to the other pole of that kneecap. And we're coming in here and we're doing that same compression distension technique right on that patellar tendon. So this is a fantastic way to just use that scissor function to really, really enhance that environment of that knee in all those different quadrants, on the front and the back end, on the side, that IT band, and on that medial side as well. I'll tell you where I'm going to put most of my time is on the front end here in this quadriceps tendon and that IT band, and then I'm going to do the touch up in the joint lines wherever I may feel that specific sort of joint line pain syndromes. I'm probably going to do that with the nub. You can also do it with the cane ends if you sort of supported the cane with the door hanger, and then you could just get the cane end in that area, and now I can just sort of lean into it with my body weight, and I could work on those joint lines that way. That's going to conclude the compression to distension portion of the knee. Following, I'm going to have the stretching portion that I use, the basic stretches that I use for the knee. And then we're going to cover the exercises, the basic exercises that I use for the knee as well. And remember, when we're rehabbing an area, it's always that trifecta. We're going to do the compression distension, then we want to stretch, and then we want to put some demand on the tissue for the remodeling process, for the recruitment of those muscles so that they are loading that joint, learning to load that joint properly in that right environment, in that enhanced, in that, where that potential, that tissue has been optimized. I want to cover one more alternative way to do the compression to distension technique using the scissor function on the knee. If you don't have a wide enough stance and you can't get if this hook around the opposite knee, I'll say I'm doing the compression distension on this leg and I would normally hook this leg. If you can't get a comfortable hook on there, like your stance isn't as wide as mine, then you're going to use the door anchor. I'm going to use this hook here for practical purposes, but that door anchor would be in your door, and you're going to hook the big hook on that, and then you just adjust that height up or down, and now you're going to be able to use that compression, that leverage for that compression distension technique using that door anchor. So this leg doesn't even need to be in there, and then you can just use it that way. Like I said, you may have to adjust it up or down, but that's going to allow you to use that door anchor to hold this side of the hook while you're compressing down with that roller portion. Okay, thanks for watching.